Crockett's career as a professional writer, which began in the 1890s and spanned two dynamic decades, serves as a lens through which we can explore the rapidly changing publishing industry of his era. This month, I want to look at how shifting trends, key relationships, and evolving industry norms shaped both Crockett's career and the literary landscape he inhabited. The late 19th century witnessed a dramatic transformation in the publishing industry. Rising literacy rates and an expanding middle class fueled a demand for accessible literature, and publishers quickly adapted to cater to these audiences. Innovations like serialized fiction, affordable paperbacks, and a growing emphasis on marketing authors as public personalities expanded readership among the working and middle classes. The 1890s was a vibrant decade in the publishing world, a time when the book industry was evolving rapidly in response to changing social, technological, and cultural dynamics. Several key publishing companies emerged or solidified their positions during this time, shaping the literary tastes of the period and influencing the development of both popular and highbrow literature. During this period, authors were no longer confined to the triple-decker novel format or the highbrow standards of an elite reading audience. Instead, writers like Crockett found their works were distributed widely and their careers boosted by serialization and mass-market publication. Publishers increasingly promoted authors as celebrities, bringing them closer to the public eye and creating the Victorian cult of celebrity, a trend that would play a great role in Crockett's career. Crockett began writing for magazines while a student in the 1870s. He continued this as a kind of side hustle while Minister of Pennycook Free Kirk between 1889 and 1894. His breakthrough came in 1893 when his short story collection, The Stickit Minister and Some Common Men, was published by T. Fisher Unwin. The success swiftly transformed Crockett into a sought-after author, and Unwin, determined to capitalise on his success, published 4 other works by Crockett in 1894. This blanket bombing of the market had several effects. It is perhaps a key reason why his breakthrough novel The Raiders is still his best known, being so widely promoted, and it also meant that Crockett became a pawn in what we might see as the cultural wars of the time. These are factors that have not been explored enough in relation to Crockett's oeuvre, and it's one of my key interests. Yes, I enjoy reading many of Crockett's works, but there's much more to explore and discover by digging into the context of his life and legacy within the history of publishing and culture. Of course, no author succeeds in a vacuum, and it's worth looking at some of the most significant professional relationships Crockett established and maintained throughout his career. There were several influential figures who played a key role. While William Hale Wiley might be credited for giving Crockett space to write in the Glaswegian The Christian Leader magazine, which brought him to the attention of more influential figures, this early relationship was marred through disputes over rights to Crockett's published stories. Letters from the archive open up the man behind the myth very effectively, but to date have been inaccessible to those interested in knowing more about Crockett in his context. Of that, more another time. The first really significant figure in Crockett's professional career might then be said to be William Robertson Nicoll, who championed his work and introduced him to publisher T. Fisher Unwin. You might think of Nicoll as an influencer in today's parlance. He was editor of influential publications such as the British Weekly and the Bookman. As such, Nicoll was instrumental in connecting Crockett to a broader reading public, and his promotion helped Crockett emerge as one of the most recognised literary figures of his time. From 1894 onwards, Crockett was widely written about across the magazines of the day, and by 1897, when his caricature was featured in Vanity Fair, he'd become a seriously hot property. Promotion is all well and good, but a writer needs a committed publisher to achieve visibility. T. Fisher Unwin was Crockett's first major publisher, and his catalogue featured a broad range of literary output, from social reform and adventure tales to works with an underlying sense of national identity and cultural exploration. By publishing such diverse works, Unwin helped bridge the gap between the intellectual elite and the increasingly popular middle-class reading audience of the time of Crockett's career. Unwin established his own firm in 1882, distinguishing himself by tapping into niches in the literary market, and by the 1890s he was renowned for championing new writers. His strategies also meant that he published on both sides of the great cultural divide of the time, which we might term as the tension between the traditional improving novels and the rising aesthetic or decadent art for art's sake movement. Sides were taken, and Crockett was placed firmly on the side of the former. His great commercial success caused no small amount of chagrin and jealousy among authors of the other camp, who could only dream of the broad market appeal Crockett achieved. The relationship with Unwin serves to remind us that Crockett's early success unfolded during a time of significant innovation in publishing and reflected the complex tensions of an era that was redefining the role of literature. The third, and perhaps most crucial figure in Crockett's career, was A.P. Watt, the pioneering literary agent who managed his business interests. Watt's agency, the first of its kind, advocated for authors' financial rights, securing lucrative contracts for serialised publications, and he negotiated very favourable terms for Crockett. Their relationship was both professional and personal. At the beginning of Crockett's career, Watt loaned him the sum of £335 to pay off Wiley, who had loaned Crockett a larger sum some years previously to cover a private family debt. Crockett had been working off that debt through writing. So when Watt stepped in, it effectively transferred the obligation. Crockett appreciated Watt's intervention, thereby establishing a relationship of loyalty and trust that lasted throughout the author's life. We might also observe it bound Crockett fairly firmly to Watt at a time when many publishers, including Unwin, weren't happy about their authors being represented by a middleman who managed business affairs. A.P. Watt had recognised that authors could benefit from a dedicated representative to handle contracts, negotiate with publishers, and protect their rights. This concept was revolutionary at the time. Before Watt, authors usually dealt with publishers directly and often found themselves at a disadvantage in negotiations. Watt's agency offered authors a middleman who could maximise their earnings and safeguard their interests. Over the years, A.P. Watt represented some of the most prominent writers of his era, including Thomas Hardy, Rudyard Kipling and Arthur Conan Doyle. His agency managed not only their publishing contracts, but also the rights to adaptations, translations and other opportunities that allowed authors to earn income beyond traditional book sales. Indeed, Watt's success paved the way for literary agents as a standard in publishing, establishing a model still in use today. In the 1890s, everyone wanted a piece of Crockett, and A.P. Watt was determined to get the best deals he could for them both. While Crockett would have preferred to simply write novels, the business model which brought the Scylla, as he called it, was serialisation in mass-market magazines, syndicated if possible, followed by novel publication, both at home and internationally. And this became the pattern for Crockett's publishing career. Watt was expert at placing Crockett across a broad range of publishers to cover as wide a market as possible. It's indisputable that without Watt, Crockett would not have achieved his great commercial success. Under his management, Crockett was published by many of the great publishing houses of the day, including Methuen, Macmillan and Smith & Elder, as well as forging substantial and long-lived relationships with publishers such as James Clark & Co. and Hodder & Stoughton, both of whom were big players in the syndicated serial magazine market, with many brand names both in the UK and internationally. The job of literary agent to a successful author, both then and now, is mind-boggling. Every time I look at the contracts folders in the Raiders archive, I experience a sense of awe mixed with anxiety and wonder how on earth anyone could have managed this career. The process was a long and complex one. Writing was usually commissioned around 18 months to 2 years ahead of publication. In Crockett's case, from early on, it was quite common for publishers to be somewhat vague in their requests, to ask for something in the style of the Raiders, or the Lilac Sunbonnet, or Kit Kennedy, which left Crockett a fair bit of leeway, but could also present problems at the time of delivery, and could lead to Crockett having to alter his storylines as serialisation was progressing to suit the demands, or whims, of the publisher. And of course, what made sure Crockett had more than one publisher on the go at a time? There were constantly changing delivery dates and proofs to be corrected, as well as the relentless writing. The publishing strategy seems to have been to deliver 2 serialised works a year, which were then converted into novels, generally fitting into a spring and autumn season pattern. On top of this, there were individual short stories peppered in magazines throughout the year, and specialised commissions such as his children's Waverley. Crockett was certainly kept hard at it. Luckily, he was a very disciplined writer, rising early in the morning to write and undertaking research later in the day. His travel enabled him to write foreign novels in situ, and a pattern emerges where he spent much of the winter abroad working on a European novel, and the summer in Scotland writing a home story. The early 20th century marked a new phase in Crockett's career, where changing tastes and shifting industry demands required him to adapt. Crockett's commissions were increasingly for contemporary fiction, designed to meet the Edwardian public's evolving interests, balancing his historical storytelling with themes that resonated with modern readers. This era saw Crockett experimenting with many new styles and subject matter. His work of the time reflects the uncertainty publishers felt about the market as they tried to reconcile traditional storytelling with more contemporary themes. The publishers' struggle to balance these competing demands mirrors the broader challenges of the industry at the dawn of the Edwardian era. It is in this context that a couple of contractual problems highlight the complexities Watt and Crockett were grappling with. The first came in 1902, when, 2 years after commissioning it, Ward Lock & Co. belatedly rejected Maid Margaret for publication, and Crockett refused to change it, on the grounds, he said, that I could not change her sexual relationships, for they were, plain on the face of things, thus, and not otherwise. He offered Wardlock an alternative, which he noted to Watt would be, in style, an idyll, and frankly, virginibus puerisque. This is in reference to some of Stevenson's writing in the 1880s about love and marriage. I recommend your reading Stevenson's essays on the topic if you're interested in gaining more insight into Crockett's ability to be humorous even in difficult circumstances. In the event, Wardlock took the alternative offered, Strong Mac, for serialisation in their Windsor magazine, before publication in 1904, while Hodder and Stoughton stepped in and published Maid Margaret in 1905. At this time, Hodder and Stoughton were in the process of trying to buy up Crockett's entire catalogue and meeting some resistance, which is an explanation why the 1904 publication Raiderland is limited in some of its novel excerpts. Hodder and Stoughton became Crockett's most significant partnership in the second half of his career, which was just as well, because in 1907 there was a falling out with his other most consistent relationship, James Clark & Co. Clark's had published more than a few of Crockett's works across a range of their magazines as well as in novel form, but relationships became increasingly strained. In 1907, James Clark & Co. accused T. Fisher Unwin of breaching an agreement with Crockett over the purported simultaneous publication of 2 works. In a letter of May 1907, Watt describes Clark's as very tiresome people, who kept changing their demands, and in this instance they had commissioned Vida, being serialised in The People's Friend during 1907 and due to be published in novel form in the autumn of 1907. The contract stated that Crockett would not publish another novel at the same time, and yet T. Fisher Unwin intended to publish Me and Mine in July. There's an increasingly ill-tempered exchange of letters between agent and publishers, and Crockett stepped in to claim that Me and Mine was only a light collection of stories on stamp collection and not a full-dress novel, also pointing out that July was hardly autumn. The dispute evolved into a court case, which serves to highlight the often chaotic world of early 20th century publishing, where the demands on authors were high and rights negotiations somewhat complex. It's worth remembering that while all this drama was commercially driven, Crockett was loyal to his personal and professional friends, but his career was impacted by the outcome as much as by the changing fashions in fiction. Increasingly, the demand was for contemporary works, and while Crockett supplied these as well as continuing with his more traditional style fare, the marketplace was becoming more fractured and difficult to predict and to please. Looked at from a publishing history perspective, Crockett's career provides a fascinating case study in the transformation of the publishing industry from the Victorian to Edwardian periods. He was an adaptable and innovative writer whose works reflected the evolving taste of his readership. Far from his writing declining in quality, as some 20th century critics suggested, I believe Crockett's later works reveal an author responding to the rapid cultural and social changes around him. The collaboration between Crockett and his network of promoters, publishers and agents highlights the emerging professionalism in the literary world. Watt's advocacy for Crockett's financial interests set a precedent for author-agent relationships, while Nichols' promotion tactics underscore the importance of literary influencers, a role that would only grow in the 20th and 21st century. Thus, Crockett's story illustrates the importance of adaptability in a rapidly shifting industry. His experience underscores the delicate balance authors must strike between market demands and personal integrity, an issue as relevant today as it was in his time. His legacy provides insight into the power dynamics, financial pressures, and cultural tensions that shaped the early modern publishing world. So, reflecting on Crockett's career today, we see more than just the story of a successful author who wrote stories of history, adventure, and romance. We see a rich, turbulent landscape in which literature, commerce, and social change intersected, laying the groundwork for the literary industry we are more familiar with today.